Life is a dream, time like a stream, carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend up from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
This is a reading from Whispers from Eternity, a book of prayer poems by Paramhansa Yogananda. This is entitled, Make Me Thy Butterfly of Eternity. Master writes, I have burnt my past, destroying every seed of evil destiny. I have stridden bravely through the strewn ashes of my past and future fears. I am the eternal now, having torn to shreds my enclosing cocoon of ignorance with the sharp knife of free will. Now I am thy soaring butterfly of eternity, flitting freely through immeasurable skies of time. The beauty of my wings I spread out through nature everywhere to entertain all beings. My wings are sprinkled with suns and stardust. Lo, I am beautiful. May every silken thread that shrouded my past folly be severed forever. See, they now trail behind me, only adding to my beauty as I wing my way to my own self in thee. It's so lovely, Master's words and the power behind them, because we make me thy butterfly of eternity, and we can sort of imagine just kind of a nice, beautiful butterfly just flitting and floating and happily, cheerfully, just in the sunbeam of God's love and so on, and that's true. But what happens first? We have to, stride bravely through the strewn ashes of our past and future fears and tear to shreds our enclosing cocoon of ignorance with the sharp knife of free will. You will find Master has a very strong warrior spirit. This is true of his past incarnations as well. And so in every poem, I imagine there would be something like, make me thy spiritual cream puff, not cream puff. That's a bad example because Sister Gyanamata specifically said, let us not become spiritual cream puffs. But I could imagine him saying, I have boiled the dough of my consciousness in the fires of realization, something. It's always this, because it takes great energy to find God. Let us make no mistake about it. Before I read this reading, I would like to once again greet you all. It's such a joy to be back home. And more, sometimes people express surprise when we refer to Chennai as our home. And people here expressed surprise, or they said, oh, how nice that you call it home. But it is home. And one explanation we gave last time was that home is where your bed is. When you sleep in beds that are not yours, that's not your home. But when you sleep in the one that has your pillow and your sheets and your blanket and is right where you left it, that's how you know that's your bed and therefore your home. Of course, that's a joke because there's much more to the feeling of home than just one's stuff, one's possessions or objects or things like that. In fact, when we were in America, we have had storage. When we left for Chennai, we had stored some things. And what we did this visit is go through, and just about 75% of those things we just gave away. It was time to be free of them for a few reasons. One is, when we came to Chennai, we didn't know if we'd be turning around and coming right back. We didn't know. If we did, it wouldn't be because of our own wish, but we didn't know if there would be enthusiasm for a center here. We didn't know if people would want to come. They did come once. We didn't know if they would come a second time. It's sort of fun to see the foreigners maybe one Sunday, but after that I've done it. No, people wanted to keep coming. And I say foreigners partly in jest because we would sometimes get pizza from Tuscana, which was on Chamiers Road, which wasn't so far from the center. And once, soon after we moved here, Mary asked us when. We would call them, place the order, and so on. And then Mary asked us, when would you, what would you like me to get you? And I said, well, we actually eat from we don't eat from Tuscana now, so please don't try this now. But she said, I'll order a pizza for you. So we gave her the pizza description that we order with this, please add this and don't add that and have this and so on. And so when she went there and placed the order, they said, oh, is this for the two foreigners? Just kind of like, we've had people come here, the Amazon guys have come here. Oh, sir, I saw you 4 years ago in Alwarpet. It's sort of like, is it that memorable? I mean, my gosh. So, and you all know one of my favorite stories when I ordered from Amazon and I said, please deliver it not here, but to some other person. And the Amazon person said, yes, but the ordering person said, but what is your name? I said, Dharmarajan. No, your name. And so, anyway, it is the other reason why we thinned out our belongings over there is because it's now been 5 years. Actually, almost to the day. We arrived June 7th or June 8th, 5 years ago. And so after about 5 years, you have to say, well, I guess it's working. And that also, all these things that are there, not only do we not need them, we haven't needed them for 5 years, but also, even if we did, they're kind of old now. They represent, there's nothing wrong with them, but they represent a past. And this is now a new present, a new home. And so there's a thrift store at Ananda Village called The Jewel and the Lotus. That's the name of a play that Swami Kriyananda wrote. And so they named the thrift store that sort of, you can find these little jewels there. And so we put all these things out there, and even somebody who we knew sort of said, oh, those are some nice looking glasses. And before they could even get into the thrift store, he walked off with them. So it was nice to see these things going on into their new incarnations. I visited another part of Ananda Village, and it's in the expanding light. There are different places where guests can stay, and there's one place called Serenity House. And Serenity House has a lounge that's smaller than this, but it's a place to have a small class with a few people and so on. There's tables and chairs, and I smile sometimes to go in there because the whole place practically was furnished by Dharmini and me when we moved to India the first time. And so all of our furniture from Ananda Village, there's the same table and the chairs, and there's that, and all those little things. It's kind of funny. It's like walking through, your past lives. And so, and that's the spoon I used to use, and so on. And it's nice to sort of see these things, but not as ours, that we have let them go. I had this experience in Pune too, because when we moved away from Gurgaon, somehow the plates that we had used in Gurgaon found their way to Pune. And when someone handed me one in Pune at the retreat, I sort of, again, it's kind of a bit of a shock, because on the one hand you think, but this is mine, and then you realize it's not. And then how strongly we identify with the things that are ours. But just imagine how many times if you go to like a used store and get some old silverware, again, I don't know if this makes any sense, but imagine that it does make sense. And you get maybe some knife that you used in your past life, and you wouldn't even know it. He wouldn't even care. That was the last life, but this life, no, these are my knives. I don't know. Do you mean you can save them for your next life? I think you all know the story of the man who went to a psychic to find out who he would be in his next life so he could will all of his money to that person. But what does it matter? And in a way, it's nice to be able to just start fresh, just break with the past. Whatever has been fine. It got me to this point. I'm grateful. But now let me just go onward free, rather than constantly thinking about the past. There's also, this time coming back, as I said, it's such a joyful reconnection time. We got to see many of you, most of you, on Skype when we called, at least once. And it's really funny because you can talk on the phone to people, but when you see them, there's more joy, certainly. And you can say things like, oh, you got a haircut and so on, which is very hard to tell over the phone otherwise. But somehow then when you reconnect and you see each other, it doesn't feel like there's been that much of a gap. Because two reasons. One is because you've seen each other, and so it's like, well, I saw you last week, and so I see you now, as opposed to 6 weeks ago. But also because of the shared spirit of devotion to God, to these masters, to Master and Swamiji. It cuts across everything. Nidhi, who's not here, but she was in, where was she? Serbia? Serbia, yeah, which used to be Yugoslavia or so, anyway, something that part of Eastern Europe. And she happened to be there. First I would like to know how she happened to be in Serbia. It's one thing to say I happened to be in Ananagar West, but it's another thing to be, I was in Serbia the other day looking for a yoga place. And she said, and she found a Nanda Sangha in Serbia. And she went there and they were chanting Door of My Heart, and there were the masters, and she just fit right in. It's beautiful. She posted a little video of that, and it was very nice to see. Very heartwarming how, without even knowing people, without even knowing the same language, you could connect in that way. And so that tells us also the depth of our connection. Because even it's one thing to meet strangers and then to feel that they're not strangers. It's another thing to have been with devotees, to be with disciples of Master, Guru Bhais, fellow truth seekers, for months, years. And to feel that sense of friendship, that sense of connection. And we can sometimes overlook that because when we see each other all the time, or because it's so easy to see each other on one level, or we do it regularly, we can sometimes lose sight of the great blessing and the great privilege that it is. I don't mean that we take it for granted. We just aren't necessarily aware of how much it is helping us. How much those connections mean. Sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. But it's much easier to find God with help, with community, than it is to do it on one's own. Master said something even stronger than that. He said, your spiritual progress and your level of attunement, your connection with Master and the Gurus, is determined primarily by the number of kriyas that you practice, by the depth of your devotion, by the volume of your prayers as you shout to God, by your sincerity, by your discipline, unwavering, never making one mistake. My God, not possible. That's our goal. That's not the process of getting to the goal. No, he didn't say that. He said, your spiritual progress is determined primarily by the company you keep. Pretty amazing, isn't it? The company you keep. Why is that? We all know why. Because we have some friends, and we call them up and say, I'm kind of in a bad mood. And the friend says, yeah, I am too. And so we go, great, perfect. Ah! But then at the end of it, how do we feel? Let's find somebody else in a bad mood. But if we are with positive people, if we come in half asleep, as I'm afraid I might be because of this jet lag, Still, we see bright shining faces. We see somebody who says, "Hi, how are you?" or anything. And we see the masters and we feel the devotion of everyone and it lifts us. You see? And we also contribute to that. It isn't as if we are just sponges that have to come along finding good vibes to soak in. There is an element of that, but it's not just that we're passive recipients. We also contribute. And you could say, okay, well, we're doing our part. We should contribute positive vibrations too. And that way, when someone else comes in, they can also sponge. We can send to them. It's not just that. It's not just that in giving, we are helping others. In giving, we help ourselves, which is perhaps obvious. But the other is, it is a gift to us when somebody receives what we have to say. So let me give you a concrete example. You cannot always tell everyone, "I've read Autobiography of a Yogi, I've dedicated myself to the teachings of Master. Isn't that wonderful?" You know, there's enough nods that I won't explain why that's not always easy to do. With family, with friends, with colleagues. Some you can find, but most not. So the thing that is most precious to us, that we devote most of our waking hours of thought, or we would like to, that we have to keep secret. So we have to walk around. "How are you? What do you do?" "Oh, what were you doing recently?" "Well, let's see. I meditated. I read Autobiography of a Yogi. I was practicing a chant on the harmonium." No. So what do you have to say? "Oh, I found a new app for my phone. It's really nice. It tells you where all the petrol stations are, and what the prices are." "Oh, really?" "Yeah." And so then we, and that's what we have to limit our conversation to. You see? So it's a relief when we can find others to share with. It helps us in other words, it helps us to give. It helps us to have friends to give to. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because again, you benefit by receiving, but you also benefit by giving, by not having to just keep the thing most precious to us hidden. And so I say all this, and I say it joyfully. The other part of this, my talk, you could go load up just about every June. It's the jet lag talk. I always give some jet lag caveat, which is, if you haven't had jet lag, you really should try it. It's because it's not like things you've had before. It's not like being tired. Because when you're tired, you can just kind of, muscle on through. The body can just kind of slow down and stop, but you can keep on at least focusing. I'm going to do it with willpower. Tonight I'll have a good sleep. What does it matter? Jet lag, it's not only the body, it's the brain also. It just stalls. And my friend, who I quote probably every year, she says, she's from Hong Kong, she said, "Jet lag is very difficult to control." And it's exactly right. With sleepiness you can control it, but with jet lag you're just out. I was saying I can stay awake yesterday. We got in at 10:30 in the morning, got home at about 12:30, and I was trying to stay awake, and I'm going to stay awake. I don't feel tired at all. Forget it. I'm going to bed. So anyway, the other difficulty about jet lag is that the brain can stop functioning even though the mouth is still going. And so if that happens this morning, I apologize. So, okay. The reason I also said all of this before the reading is because, as also happens when we come back on this weekend, just about every year, every week of the year has a specific reading assigned to it by this book. And so this was Swami Kriyananda's creation, and it's a beautiful thing because it compares the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. But it also, over the whole year, encompasses the whole teaching of the spiritual path. So that's why we don't just read from it randomly. Or, even that wouldn't matter, I suppose, if at least we would cover everything. But there's also a progression. The nature of reality, the nature of our existence, and then leading through the ups and downs of the spiritual path. And finally, at the end of the year, we come to basically self-realization. that which we are seeking. It's not that he waits to let you in on that at the very end, but he talks about that state. So this subject for this week, as it always is, week 23, when we come back, is why do devotees fall? And so it's kind of hard to say, why do devotees fall? Now, let me tell you a joke. It's kind of like, okay, serious. And so I didn't really want to read this whole thing about why devotees fall and then say, it's so nice to see you again, and how are you? And, oh, hey, how's your daughter? And all these, it's kind of like, this is a serious subject. And sometimes there can even be a temptation to sort of, well, why don't we read a different one that we skipped from last week, like how to be cheerful all the time and so on. But you know, everything that we do is really this is a very serious question to keep in mind in everything that we do. Not a grim question, not one to be afraid of, but one that, after all, what if we didn't know this party was here? What if we didn't know these meditations, this center was here? Just yesterday, some people walked in. I want to learn Kriya Yoga. We were so happy for them. You know, but the center has been here for 5 years, and many of you have been a part of that for many number of years, and some even 5 years or more. And so, what if we suddenly left that protection, left that joy? It doesn't make any sense, and yet that's what it means to fall. Now, I don't mean if you leave this center and follow another path, that means it's hard to make any statement without saying yes, but on the other hand. But if we fall from the joy that we have reached so far, then that you can consider a fall. Now remember, a fall also leads to us going back up again. The story is never over. But anyway, let's read what Swamiji has to say on this. Why do devotees fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles, and the apostles, that means a direct disciple of Christ. And there were only 12, and he was one of them. Yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. If you don't know the whole story, Judas was the one who told the authorities who were looking for Jesus where to find him. He was hidden. And they came and they found him, they took him away and killed him, crucified him. And so Judas was the one who did that. And the question is, how could he be one of the 12 direct disciples and then do this? We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing, with his death, the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Judas said, "Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor?" The Bible continues, This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and kept the purse, and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, Let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it, indeed, fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For, as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, although through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic. That drew his thoughts toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the second chapter, Sri Krishna states, "If one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminative faculty, and when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramhansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. It's such an important subject, this one, and one to be studied again and again and again and again. And first, sometimes when we talk, why do devotees fall, when we talk of that subject, one of the thoughts that enters is, yeah, let me tell you, I'm falling all the time. I fell on my way here. I'm actually falling right now. And that's that thought of embarrassment, or that thought of guilt, or that thought of, I know what the right thing was, and yet I didn't do it. And I'm still upset with myself, or I feel sort of that my 100% purity that I was going for is unattainable because I made that one mistake, and many other. I'll never be completely pure. And God knows that. That's the whole goal. As I said, we are here to become pure, not to already be pure. It is not in order to become pure, a prerequisite is not that you already be pure. Obviously. And if that, I hope I don't have to explain the logical conundrum that follows from that. You see? And so the other side of that is that oh, darn, it's already begun. I lost that whole thought where I was going. What was I going to say about that? Yes, because a friend of mine was saying to me, she said rather ruefully, well, we were talking about a friend who had passed away, and she was remembering his funeral. He was a member of Ananda, and she said, yes, I often wish that at my funeral people would say what they said of him. So many people said, I never heard him utter an unkind word about others. She said, it's too late for that. And I smiled because she's very kind and she's very kindly. And yet if we look back, we can say no matter what I did, I still remember in third grade or third standard when I stuck it to somebody, and so therefore I'm never going to outlive that or outgrow that. What's worse is sometimes if people, not even we, but other people hold such things over our heads. We start to grow and improve and become better, and people say, oh, who are you kidding? I know you. You can't do, what are you playing at? Trying to be better. And besides, if you're so spiritual, why did you get mad? Meanwhile, the other person gets mad constantly. It's like their profession. What do you do for a living? I get mad. What does that mean? What are you asking for? You see, it's just like, it's usually one finds the worldly people, meaning those who are seeking joy from the world. That's what worldly means. Worldly does not mean sort of evil, sinner, any of the heavy things like, the worldly people. So we don't want to even use those words. There's this phrase in Christianity sometimes when people are cursing somebody, they'll say, "You're going to go to hell," and so on. And then Swamiji said, well, don't say as yogis, "You're going to get bad karma." He said that's just the same thing as saying you're going to go to hell. And so, don't call anyone a sinner, but they're so worldly. We don't want to think of that in withering tones. We ourselves have some part of us that is worldly too, that is seeking joy through the world, as opposed to seeking joy from God. Because when we get all of ourselves in the direction of God, then we'll be free. So if we're not free, we still have some things to work on. And that's fine. That's understood. That's why we are here and what we are here to do. So there's no reason to feel badly about it. There's no reason to worry about it. As I was saying to some of you earlier, every mistake that we make is just an experience that builds to our overall education. You see, some habits are not overcome just with the thought that they are not good. First, we have to hear that it's not good. Then we have to agree that it's not good. Someone may say it's not good to I don't what would be like to have 75 cups of coffee a day. We could say, well, I don't know why you don't think so, but I think it's fine. But then after a while, the stomach starts to complain, then the body starts to shake and so on. We say that all of matter has a certain vibration, and mine is about like this after 4 cups of cappuccino or whatever it is. And so we realize that, we're edgy, we're nervous. I spoke too quickly because I was keyed up because of too much coffee. I now agree it is not a useful thing to have too much. I'm not saying to have any. Don't worry, I don't want to get chased out of here. But to not have too much, that is a good thing. And so then we have to start working on it. We find it's not so easy because I slept through the afternoon meeting because I'm trying to have less coffee. Less coffee, more sleep, but now no job because I'm not functioning anymore. And so, you see, we have to work on them. Some habits, and this is a trivial thing I'm speaking of, much less other things, like not responding in anger, not being afraid. These things are fundamental to some people. And not everybody has the same fundamental delusion. In other words, someone may be very good at being brave, but also have an anger issue. Someone else may not be so angry because they think so poorly of themselves that if somebody mistreats them, they say, go ahead, join the club. So they don't get that mad about it. But they're afraid all the time of getting slapped yet again. And the other person says, why are you afraid? And the other one says, why are you angry? It's okay. Meaning there's different things to work on. This is why it's better not to envy someone else. It's very interesting. Master said if you are sort of admiring or wishing you had the life of someone else, and I'm talking spiritually. I'm not saying, oh yes, I wish to be Shah Rukh Khan and I will get my hair done in the same way. I mean, these kinds of things we've all probably grown through. But it's instead when we say, oh, look at that person, they're so spiritual, so disciplined, they always wake up, they're never sleepy, they never make any deviation from their sadhana, how fantastic, how I wish I could be like that person. Now, if you're admiring a strength that someone has, that's good. If you're seeing someone who has conquered a test that you are working on, it's good to spend time with them. You don't want to spend time with people necessarily who are struggling in the same exact way. You want that positive magnetism of the successful person to rub off on you. You see? Master said if you want to be a businessman, mix with successful businessmen. If you want to be an artist, mixed with successful artists. Successful. You see? That people are saying, yes, I can. Yes, it can be done. Rather than, no, it can't, and I wish it, and I want it too, and I don't have it either. That brings us down. So, it's wonderful to absorb positive qualities and habits of others into yourself, sure. but don't desire to be that person. Why? Master said, if you could see behind the eyeballs to the karma, you would be very glad that you are yourself. And I've always thought that was funny because sure, we can say, ha ha ha, that's great. But that's what the other person thinks when they look at you too. Oh, actually, that's okay, Vaindam. Now, why would that be? Why would it that if I could see the full picture of that person, I would rather be myself? He didn't explain. And why would someone else looking at me say, actually, it's okay, I'm good the way I am? Not the way I am steeped in delusion, but I don't want to become you. Why? I can only guess why he said that. The fact is, he said it. And therefore, we should try to live by it. But why? One thing I think is because you may see the strength that this person has, but you may see other things they have yet to learn that you have already learned. And so in 2 years, they're going to work on adding fractions. Now, you may already be good at adding fractions, and who wants to go through all of the thing about common denominator and all this stuff, and then lowest terms, and when you already know how to do it? Why do you want to sit through all of that? I use this example all the time, and Prasanna says, I still even now don't know how to add fractions. So we're going to change now the course fees to be $6.50 and 7/11 rupees, and so he'll get very good at adding fractions when doing the accounting. So, I'm joking. So, the idea is that we have learned so much, and when we get down on ourselves, the one thing that we're upset with ourselves about not learning, that becomes the whole thing. This is the infatuation that was spoken of in the Gita. Anger. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger arises infatuation, the thought that one object alone will satisfy us. Do you know how it is when you're upset about something? Or put it another way, it's first easier when someone's upset at you. You didn't do the one thing that I asked. Not Kartik, thank you for coming. So glad to see you. I usually, like I said, I don't point at people because I've done that before in the old days. Just it's not pointing, but just sort of to make the point. I said, like this, and the person went, ah! And so I said, no, I'm sorry, not pointing at you. So I tried to point into the void, but Kartik walked right in the direction of the bullet. So sorry about that. Someone's mad at us. I can't believe you didn't do that thing. And, we start to... I'm sorry, but I've done a lot of other things, all of them good, and I started to think, but this one thing, and now I'm going to jail for this one thing that I did. But we can do that with ourselves. I can't believe I did, well, okay, but we are a work in progress. But no, because of that one thing, everything else is invalidated. That's infatuation. That's when we've lost perspective, and we're focused on this one thing. What about that, all the positive things? This is why the antidote to that, once Swami Kriyananda said to someone, if you're finding yourself depressed or sort of in a perpetual grumpy mood, every day find things to be grateful for and write them down. Because again, we can always say, I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head, I'm grateful that I have dosa batter in the fridge, and I'm grateful for the coffee. It's just like we don't even mean it anymore. So one thing I myself try to do, following his example, is to find 5 things that I'm grateful for today. 5 things that happened today. Not, well, I had the roof over my head still and the coffee. No, 5 new things. 5 things specific to today that didn't happen yesterday necessarily, or are always true. And so I find it just breathes life and joy into the situation and opens up that infatuation that focuses on this one thing that's not right. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. The other is that we are on a journey, as I said. So every experience trains us. Habits cannot be overcome necessarily, just instantaneously. And so every time we work on them, every time we resist them, we gain in strength. Even if we still fall into them, at least we resisted. Remember, Master said, I don't ask you to overcome delusion, or was it temptation? I don't ask you to overcome temptation, I ask you to resist it. You see, and there's a big difference in that. Because sometimes when we say, well, I'm giving in to temptation, and I did yesterday too, so I might as well just go for it. No, try to hold back. Even if you find yourself going forward, just say, well, this is not me. Two friends of ours were having an argument, and starting to have an argument, so they said. In the middle of it, the husband said, I'm not hooked yet, are you? And the wife, she just laughed, because she realized, yeah, okay, we're not so fully committed that this has to become a brawl. And they laughed, and they stepped back, and they let it go. You see, it's helpful to notice when we are not yet hooked, if we can unhook ourselves. But even if we can't, we can say, oh, well, let me try to make up for it, do better, and let me remember how this feels. Because even though I said my points perfectly and the other person was reduced to ashes, I still don't feel that great afterwards. And I know the other person is plotting, how they can, when they're going to come, for me next. And so it's like even when we win in such a way, we don't win. And so that motivates us to say, maybe not. So these experiences of mistakes are part of our learning. You see what I mean? This was all a big, long counter to that being too hard on ourselves. Don't be too hard on yourself. As Swamiji said, how few people in the world, how many, meaning not many, how few people in the world have good karma to consciously be on the spiritual path. You've chosen to be on the spiritual path. It's only because you have the good karma to choose to be on the spiritual path. And you yourself have generated that good karma by choosing to be on the spiritual path lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. That's what builds the momentum. That's what makes the spiritual path make such sense. It makes perfect sense that I should sit and meditate, and that will improve my day, and that will improve my life and everything. Well, why does it make sense? It doesn't make sense to a whole lot of other people. And I don't mean that to criticize. I just mean statistics, facts. It's not me, it's Krishna. 1 out of 1,000, he says, seeks me. 1 out of 1,000. And yet when you find such joy in doing it, you think, why isn't it 1,000 out of 1,000? It's so much fun. So we have to be aware that we have a lot to be grateful for. We have a lot even to congratulate ourselves on. If we are in the habit of discouraging ourselves, it would be good to put in some encouragement also. And then yet, on the other side, we have to remember, as it says, Master said in the reading, you're not safe until you're in nirvikalpa samadhi. So let us not ever feel content that, okay, I'm good enough. I'm spiritual than everyone else, in my PIN code. And so I think that's spiritual enough. You see, this is why it's also good to be with other spiritual people. Because if you're sort of in an office, in my graduate school before I came here, this one Russian man student had this habit of giving everybody a nickname. And none of them were all that flattering. In fact, none of them were flattering. And so his nickname, I knew mine was coming. And so finally someone told me, yeah, he calls you the saint. And I thought, because I knew he meant it perhaps as a joke or as an insult, but I thought, well, I can live with that. I was thrilled. I thought, that's what I want to be. And so it was fun for me. But still, that's how most people regard us. Ha, 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 ha. So when you are the most spiritual one of your little group, you can sort of, yes, I will come and resolve all difficulties. I will do a healing prayer for you. But when you mix with others, then you say, wow, this person has this quality that I'm working on. Look at how wonderful this person is. It's not even an analysis of, well, what is their rating on the different yamas and niyamas? 6 out of 8 or something. It's not a score. It's just the joy you feel in that particular soul expressing itself more and more. Divine Mother coming through that particular one in its own way. Just like the flowers in a garden are different but beautiful each one. And so you see them, oh, that one's beautiful too, in the same way. So we are as we grow. And so, again, as I said, that's helpful for us because it keeps us realizing what more there is to do, to grow. And so we're not done until we're done. And as Sri Yukteswar announced to Master, I will not fail to inform you when you have reached the blessed state. Before then, time to work. So we have to balance this on both sides, but always joyfully. If we're saying, I'm such a terrible person, we need to have something joyful. If we're saying, I'm such a wonderful person, certainly more wonderful than that person, same problem. We have to find a way to be joyful in it. Now, this story of Judas, Swamiji doesn't go into the whole explanation in this reading, because it's still, he asked Master. Judas, just in case you're not sure, Judas is sort of thought of as the worst evildoer there is. It's not fair to think of him that way. But, in case this doesn't make any sense, just imagine if Master's life had ended that way. That one of the disciples had reported him to an assassin who wanted to kill him for something he said, and that person had killed Master, had shot him. I don't mean to make such a dreary story, but that could be a little bit vivid. What if it had happened to Swamiji the same way, that somebody had betrayed him and then he was killed as a result? We would not be saying, well, you have to understand, in the cosmic scheme. It would be too hard on our hearts because our most beloved would have seemed to have been snatched away from us because of his own beloved disciples' betrayal. It would be pretty rough. In fact, Master writes in Autobiography of a Yogi when Sri Yukteswar criticized him to his father. Sri Yukteswar criticized Master to his father. And his father came back and said, I expected to find you a wreck. And then Master came to Sri Yukteswar and said, was that just, sir, to criticize me in front of my... I'm sorry to laugh because I'm remembering what happens next. To criticize me in front of my parent? And Sri Yukteswar said very meekly, I will not do it again. And Master said, how rare it was to see the lion humbled before me. The moment was savored to the fullest. Because Sri Yukteswar, of course, was usually the lion, just, trying to not gnash away at Master's delusion, as he puts it. But of course he came free. Anyway, never mind. But he says in Autobiography of a Yogi, the only reason for Sri Yukteswarji's displeasure was that I was trying to convert a certain man to the spiritual path. That's all it says. But that certain man was Swami Dhirananda. His name was Bhakti. That was his name he was born with. And he was Master's greatest traitor of disciple. He stole money from Master in America. He turned people against him. He launched lawsuits to sue Master and to defame him, to embarrass him publicly, both in America and in India. And in America, it worked. Master went through a very difficult time as a result of it. And so he had betrayed Master in previous lives, so Master said, in terms of all of this, Sri Yukteswar saw all that was going to happen, and so he may have even wanted, you could say, to spare Master that, seeing what would happen, to say, no, don't go through all of that. There's no need. So that's what I was saying in terms of seeing Judas, seeing someone who would betray you, to betray the Guru, and not wanting the Guru to have to go through that. This, of course, was from the point of view of his own Guru, wanting to protect him, just as a parent might want to protect a child. But you have to remember that it wasn't just Sri Yukteswar who saw what this man would do to Master, it was Master himself. He said to another friend of his when they were boys, someday Bhakti will betray me and leave the path. And I'll just say it. He said, someday he will betray me and marry a white woman. And we have to always explain, it's not that marrying a white woman was the ultimate act of betrayal. It was that he would leave his Swami vow, that he would turn against Master and the whole thing. But that's what he said. He knew it years ago. He knew. But when it happened, he didn't say, well, right on time. I actually thought it was going to be yesterday. No, he still went through, he called it my crucifixion. It was terrible for him. He also said so then why did he even put up with Dhirananda if he knew this was going to happen? Why would he? Because he was trying to help him. And in fact, Master said Dhirananda will be liberated in 3 lifetimes. 3. He didn't say, if he doesn't screw up again. And he didn't say, well, it could be 2 if he acts better, or I don't know, let's just see how the next one goes and then I'll let you know. He said 3. In 3 lifetimes he will be free. He said the next 2 will be very difficult, full of suffering. And the 3rd one will also be full of suffering up to the end. Except at the end. And then he'll be free. Free. Free means he's done, despite all that he did against his guru. It's one thing to betray someone else, it's something else to betray your own guru. And so, Dhirananda's liberation is guaranteed. I wouldn't recommend the same path, but nevertheless it's guaranteed. Judas. And so this is who Judas is. I have to say this because someone was asking Jude, our friend here. He said, your name is Jude or Judas? And he said, no, it's Jude. It was actually the cousin or the brother of Jesus or something. I forget the exact. Does anyone know? And so, anyway, and then I said, Jude and Judas are 2 different people. And he said, oh, yes, they are. And so we're starting to giggle quietly. So how could Judas do what he did? Master was asked by Swamiji, was Judas a saint, basically, in the making? He obviously fell. But was he a prophet? This is the word they used then, meaning in Christ's time or in the Bible. And Master said, oh yes, he would have had to have been, to be one of the 12. He was a great soul. Master went on to say, I met Judas in this lifetime. He said Judas was a disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahansa. And he said he was still a little attached to money. And sometimes the other disciples would tease him about it. And Ramakrishna said, let him alone. Don't. And Master met him, and he said he will be free, he will be liberated in this lifetime, 2,000 years later, approximately. So the end of Judas's story ends, like Dhirananda, in freedom. But how could it, that's a nice thing to know, but we don't have Master to tell us 6 lives for you, and 3 lives for you, and this life for you, and ask me again sometime, and so we don't have that sort of answer. So it's not necessarily a practical teaching, though it can be useful philosophically. But Master explained, and Swamiji put forth this explanation, that Judas was just trying to, in bringing the authorities to Jesus, expecting that Jesus would then perform a miracle to stop them. You see? Judas was always trying to get Jesus to sort of show his divine self, to take over, to also kind of run with the right crowd. Judas was aware of the politics of the situation. He dressed more finely than the other disciples. He was sort of the wealthier and sort of more socially connected compared to all the rest of them, even in his background before coming. And he was trying to get Judas, look, why don't you just go visit some of the, the executive director and just to say hello to him and shake hands with him and so on. And, you can call on the CM and just say, how is it going? And, it'll help things. And Jesus wasn't doing any of that. So Judas thought that if he were to force, so Master explained, a confrontation, that Jesus would then finally, he wasn't going to obviously let himself be killed, so he would perform a miracle. In fact, he did perform a miracle. When the guards tried to seize him, Peter took a sword and cut the guard's ear off. And Jesus healed the guard. He restored his ear to him. I mean, talk about forgiving your enemies. The guard was coming to take him and lead him to his death, which he did. But still, Jesus healed him first. So, Judas, in forcing this confrontation, thought he knew what his guru would do. He was helping things along. For him, it was basically a big public relations, PR thing. And so what was his horror when it turned the other way, when Jesus willingly surrendered himself? The fact that Judas was not happy with his choice and it didn't go the way he expected is implied in the fact that the money that he was given for his betrayal, he gave back to the priests who gave it to him. 30 pieces of silver, I think, is what it is. That's if you ever hear that phrase, you've sold me for 30 pieces of silver. That's what it's referring to. He threw the money back and then he killed himself. So he obviously wasn't happy about the way things went. Sometimes that part of the story gets forgotten. And what did Master say about Judas? And the fact that he killed himself? Did he say, well, that was the one smart thing he did? Ha! No. No, he said, Judas, even he, given what he had done, leading to his own guru's murder, he said, Judas should have gone to the mountains and meditated and prayed for, been shown his sorrow, prayed for redemption, offered himself up for purification. That would have been a better use of his life, a better use of his time. Not to kill himself, which, you would never say someone was within their rights to do that, but some countries have the death penalty and all this. It's a whole big question. And Master said no. He should have just meditated and prayed for forgiveness. And that's after what he did. Now, nobody in this room has done anything like that. As Master said, I don't think in this room there is a single gangster. And so also, but sometimes we can focus on things we did as if they were that big, and they're not. But even if they were, Master would say, go to the mountains or go to CIT Nagar and meditate. And just offer yourself up for purification. And let it add to your resolve that I won't do it again. And even if I do it again, I won't do it again after that. You see what I mean? Don't make it all or nothing. But just say, Master, help me. Look into the trouble I get into when you're not around. So you be with me. You help me. You take care of me. And so in this way we can grow. In this way we can be free. And let us also, if we're giving ourselves that benefit, let's give it to others too. You don't know what anybody is going through. We can think we know what they're going through, but we don't really. And if we really knew what they were going through, it would make us even more compassionate. So be patient with others, and as it says in the Living Wisely, Living Well, forgive others and life itself will forgive you. It's very beautiful that way. So in this, let us not also concentrate on all the ways there are to fall. You see? And I'm not going to make a mistake there, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this, and suddenly we've painted ourselves into a box. Anything might be a mistake. Just love God. Just ask God to be with you. We know what we're supposed to do. Meditate as best as you can. Practice your techniques. Mix with others. Try to stay positive. Follow all the things that are there. And then introspect. This was the beautiful thing that was tied with this. When we lose the ability to tell, well, I'm changing it now. Introspection, we have to assess ourselves. How am I doing? Kindly. And then discrimination is the ability to tell truth from falsehood, right from wrong. And as the Gita says, if you lose that, you lose the spiritual life. Putting it another way, in order to get onto the spiritual path, you have to care what is true. This is the only requirement. You have to care what is true. You have to care what is right. If you're doing, not you, but if someone is doing something and they say, yeah, I know it's not right, but I don't care, well, then they're waiting. to get onto the spiritual path. That's what it means to call someone a truth seeker. They are seeking the truth. This is the thing that made me so happy whenever I found a very few friends who actually cared whether something was true. Why do you think about all those things all the time? Think, talk, talk. Yawn. Who cares? Well, then, take your time. But we have to be able to know what is right and what is wrong. And the only way usually to know that is by a feeling in the heart. Not by reading all the rules and saying, according to these 6 slokas or sutras of Patanjali, I am right. I am right! We say that because the heart says, I'm not right. But if we shout loud enough and if we have enough sutras, then we can prove that we are right. But our heart tells us whether we're right or not. And so it's sometimes enough thinking, enough talking, just chant. Just love God. Just pray to God and practice Kriya and get free in this lifetime. God bless you.